will do my homage to Tesla, but really to everyone who studies electricity. It's a fantastic science. I hope to learn a lot more about it, starting with what's going on with the sun anyway, like solar physics, fascinating. We should we should have a lot about solar physics going on. So, hey, this is another Codesters. What I did is I took the lower resolution matrix, the one that's just, not as many sensors, we could call them, or hexagons, or these are the raster pattern turtles from the early Navajo blanket project, and then we progressed to where we're trying to use collision detection to figure out what we're looking at. But now I've gone back to, this is just a nice pattern. And I'd kind of like to save all these data positions in a dictionary like I was doing in the sensing, not censoring, in the sensing example. I want to keep that data dictionary, or that data, excuse me, it is a data, it's a dictionary of data. So I turn it into actually a large character string suitable for cutting and pasting. So instead of just doing a one-line dictionary or something, I do my own wrapping. I use my programming tricks from many years to spit out the matrix as something like this behind the scenes, right? It's only so wide and so high. And it's basically just all the coordinates that we're using for all these hexagons. And the value, I don't really care. I call it X, and I don't even put the X in quotes, which means when I do go back to using this, when I just cut and paste that directly from the output console, right? Because in Codesters, we don't really have a place to store the file. We can just cut and paste with the mouse, and that's what I've done here. And I've also just taken this variable X and said, well, for that to mean something, for the dictionary to work, I've got to assign it a value. So I'll just assign it the literal string X, right? So X equals quote X. And that makes the whole dictionary satisfying, it's readable. And all I do then is go through this dictionary in keys order. I just pull out the keys, and who knows what order that's going to be. It's just going to go through all the keys, set the hexagon to those positions, one after another, and put a stamp there. And so there should only be exactly the right number of stamps, but the order in which they appear, given the dictionaries are like not required to, this is first of all an emulated Python and JavaScript. So when I actually run this, you might be interested in the order in which the hexagons appear. They appear somewhat like in vertical bars, but then they deviate from that pattern, and then they start doing this crossways stuff. So I was surprised by this. I don't really understand in particular what's going on here, but we do fill up the entire canvas. So I can use this dictionary going forward and maybe find it useful in other contexts. So I'm going to save this. It's called emergence. And then for the part 2 of this, I'm going to take you to Eastern Hawthorne Boulevard, because in my last video I was saying it's got its own ambience and so on, and it's kind of a night theme video anyway, in that I used the camera in a way that I don't think maybe an older camera, this is a digital camera with very good light sensitivity settings, and so I can take it out in kind of a dusk twilight, strange lighting, and get good pictures. So this is where we left Jenny playing the piano and Zach, and I was wanting to make sure I didn't leave any confusion about Zach's shack, the hot dog shack, because I was showing while I talked about it, this very tasty, this is one of the many food carts or food pods food carts at the El Mercado, and this one's the Venezuela themed. All kinds of Latin American countries have their own food pods there. But that's not Zach's hot dog shack. That is Zach listening to Jenny play the piano. But let's go forward through the night. Okay, so that's what El Mercado looks like, and the most of the food pods are lined up right here, but the Venezuelan cart is over in the back here. Look, the piano is number 16, and El Barrio, where I have meetups, is number 9 there with outdoor seating. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. So here we're going onwards through the chronology. And let's go into, okay, so I would say the Eastern Hawthorne I'm starting to talk about now begins with Roosevelt's Terrariums. And this is a very clever business. You see how it's branded. It looks like FDR, kind of, right? That's how people remember him. And it's obviously a successful business. He teaches classes like how do you make a terrarium? And what is a terrarium, right? It's kind of a Chinese thing in a way, because I've seen a lot of sort of landscapes done in China that you could call them terrariums in a way. You don't need to have creatures in them. They're not like aquariums. They have living plants, but you don't have aquariums. Different concept. So there's a big 7-Eleven sign. This always reminds me of Göteborg, is it? Or Gothenburg is said in English, the Swedish city where I went for a PyCon. And what stood out for me is that not far from the amusement park, at a very important intersection, like 5 corners, the 7-Eleven is such a strong brand there. It's like all it's kind of upscale coffee shop, a definite landmark. And here in Portland, a 7-Eleven is a very humble thing, it seems. But the brand is still prominent and recognized everywhere. This is in front of the 7-Eleven. This is where I might rent a video. I don't usually use the red box system, but some people do, right? So you can get movies that way. And to the left or to the east of the 7-Eleven around the corner, we have one of many Hawthorne cannabis shops. There's also a flotation tank center where you can float and listen to music. It's kind of like being on the Dead Sea, which I have been, but I haven't been in a float chamber. So Zach's Shack, there we are. So there's the hot dog stand I'm talking about. This is where it really is on Hawthorne. And this is what it looks like. And you can go in there and get a hot dog, obviously. You see the giant hot dog on the sign. It's not very subtle. So there's a sign to the cannabis shop. And across the street from Zach's Shack is this Greek restaurant that is right next to Angelo's The Bar, which is where I first met Lindsay when she had escaped from Savannah, from General Dynamics, shall we say, in her escape pod with her cat, came to Portland to start over, maybe become a rock star. That's an old story in my blog. I'm talking about a blog character. And right next to Zach's Shack is this fancy Korean steakhouse called Toji. So if you're coming over from Japan, you want to visit Potorando, this is a good neighborhood to visit. That's kind of our Aztec Egyptian apartments or something, their offices. And this is an interesting mural. It was messed up by some vandals at one point, but it's back to pristine and very well made barbershop mural, right? Sort of some stereotypes, you could say. And finally, we actually see the front entrance to this cannabis shop we've been talking about. So Oregon is one of many states now. It was at one point more of an exotic thing, but we just think of it as normal to have stores like that. It's no big deal. So it's all part of the neighborhood. Goodbye, Zach Shack. Now we're coming back towards my place. We're going by the Hawthorne Theatre. And that big bus I was showing earlier, one of these is going to be that bus. I don't know if it's Demon Hunter or what, right? So some signs up on the poles. It's getting hard to read. It's kind of late at night. Lucky Strike was a Szechuan restaurant that's gone, but the sign is still there. And we're right across from the Fred Meyer in this scenario. So this is all tying back to the previous video where I was taking us a little bit on a tour of Hawthorne, in addition to showing off, there's the bus, showing off Codesters. And now we're back at the Oregon Curriculum Network headquarters. No one can doubt that I'm into this kind of geometry. It's like people around Portland must know I'm doing something with curriculum. Kind of looks like it. Looks like the trees or the plants are trying to grow up through this thing, which they are. Notice I've got lights on it. So this, I don't keep this on all night usually, but the neighbors also have bright lights. So I do stand out, but not as much as you might think. So anyway, that's enough for tonight. I hope that was interesting. I'll talk to you again soon.